Instead of doing a book-to-movie comparison this month, I wanted to take a look at some of my favorite movie versions of fairy tale retellings in keeping with my Once Upon a September theme. Now, these definitely aren't all the ones that I enjoy. I'm notorious at forgetting others until after the fact, but these are definitely some of my favorites. I decided not to go into the traditional Disney princess movies, but to concentrate more on the retellings that came after them, or even because of them. I heard someone say they didn't like this movie because it was basically a rehashing of all the different princess movies, but I think they missed just what the story was about. I've always loved this movie, but when I was preparing to do this video, I realized that Enchanted is the perfect demonstration of something that I said in my discussion video, Retold Fairy Tales in Walt Disney. You can find the link for that down below. Back in Disney's day, I think people were more susceptible to the idea of a happily ever after because they believed it was possible. The world today, however, is much more cynical. That's the entire point of Enchanted. It demonstrates that just because the world is cynical doesn't mean that true love and fairy tale happy endings can't happen. It even shows that happy endings are affected just as much by state of mind or attitude when Giselle inadvertently brings the divorcing couple back together. She reminds them that love isn't just about an emotion, it's also appreciation and respect, which is something that we tend to forget. The cliches like the poisoned apple and the glass slipper actually serve a purpose, to have the situation be instantly recognized not only by the audience but also by the characters for what it is, a real-life fairy tale happening in modern-day New York. The story is fun and literally trying to bring back the Disney magic of happily ever afters today. This one didn't do so well when it was released, but I loved it. I think people took it too seriously, but it's lighthearted and, yeah, okay, kind of silly. It created this interesting, if sometimes bizarre, artsy world. The costumes were over the top, but they also made a joke out of it. It presented the idyllic fairy tale world most people fantasize about, lavish parties, big dresses, etc. But when Snow White ventures out of the castle for the first time, she realizes that the kingdom isn't quite the utopia she's always believed it to be. I felt that it brought a nice dose of reality to the fairy tale world. As a bonus, this pretty utopia mirrors the queen's extreme vanity. She has sucked the kingdom dry to keep the palace and herself beautiful, in keeping with the original moral of the tale, which was the dangers of vanity. And I thought Mirror Mirror tied that off nicely with how they ended the queen's story. I was so immersed in the movie that I didn't even realize until the final scene that they hadn't done the whole poisoned apple bit. They didn't follow the norm, and I loved it. Not only did they still use the poisoned apple as a piece of the story, even if not the way everyone expected, but they used it to emphasize Snow White's character development within the film. Another thing I loved about this version of Snow White was how much depth they added to the characters, not just Snow White herself, and the depth resounded throughout the entire story because of it. This could possibly be my favorite version of the Snow White tale. Tenth Kingdom is just pure fun. This was probably my first great exposure to retold fairy tales outside of Disney films, so it will forever hold a place near and dear in my heart. It's 10 hours in an incredible fairy tale world that turns the familiar stories upside down and follows them through with much more human aspects, like the murder of Sally Peep and the casino, even if they do just play old maid. Plus, there's Wolf. One of the rarest successful incarnations of fairy tale retellings is one without magic. Cinderella is probably the one most popular for excluding all fairy elements. There's the Cinderella story and its dozen sequels and every knockoff of it. Don't get me wrong, I sometimes watch these when they're on TV because they're just innocent and fun, but Ever After surpasses them all. This is one of the most amazing and beautiful retellings of all. The best thing working for it, other than the great character development and the wonderful realism of the story, is how they managed to replace the magic without making it feel cheesy. And what a wonderful twist to throw in such a great and eccentric character as Leonardo da Vinci to replace the fairy godmother. The very first thing I thought about this movie was, what is up with that animation? But I quickly got over it because this is such a fun story. It borders the delicate line between funny and cheesy, and manages not to be dumb with its unexpected twists, its unique story form, and yeah, its massive cliches and movie references. Whenever this movie is on, I can't help but watch it. They twisted around all the characters and turned them into something you wouldn't expect and completely non-traditional. My very favorite is making the big bad wolf a news reporter, and this show gets extra bonus points for using the Thin Man as an inspiration for one of their characters. He's got the suit and the dog and everything, and I think my movie nerdness is starting to show. Gosh, did anyone else even catch that reference? I love this incarnation of Jack and the Beanstalk. It's never been one of my all-time favorite stories, but they did a wonderful job making Jack an interesting hero. Plus, lumping in the age-old love story didn't hurt a bit. The story is a great mix of action and morbid humor. It's right on the border between serious and cheesy, and I love it. For me, it was like Fairy Tales, The Princess Bride, and The Three Musketeers, the 1993 version with Tim Curry, were all thrown into a pot and out emerged Jack the Giant Slayer. The plot is great, but the characters is what really made it for me, especially Ewan McGregor's and Stanley Tucci's. First off, Stanley Tucci is a wonderful character actor. I love to see him in films because I never know who he's going to turn out to be. The villain, the jerk, the good guy, or the supporting sidekick. The first movie I ever saw him in was Undercover Blues, and if you haven't seen that, you really have to, because he plays a Spanish mugger who calls himself Muerte, meaning death. And the next time I saw him, he was a competitive dancer in Shall We Dance. Talk about diversity! My very favorite part of the story is how they tied it back to the original tale. Throughout the movie, I couldn't help noticing the inconsistencies between it and the original fairy tale. Oh look, they did that instead of this. I don't mind these so much, just like with book-to-movie adaptations, because I love to see other people spin on things. But one of the final scenes of this film topped it off to perfection. You watch this ending scene play out, and there's a voiceover of all these different families telling the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, and changing it. You actually listen to the evolution of the oral tale of Jack and the Beanstalk as it goes down through the centuries until it becomes the original version that we know from the fairy tales. The version that was written down. How perfect is that? Fairy tales were passed down just like that until they were written down, and they used that to irrevocably connect their story with the original. I think that wraps it up for me. I probably forgot a ton of really great movies, but I think this is a good start for now. Now, go forth and enjoy more fairy tales! But first, remember to share your thoughts.